Welcome to the podcast. I feel like I've been on a bit of a hiatus lately, probably just because of exciting things in my work world. And I'm beyond excited to have someone really special with us today. Her name is Bronti McClellan, and she is part of the Gray family. She's our portfolio support specialist. Kind of hard to say, actually. And today we're going to be talking about the just evergreen conversation about delinquency and collections, but also trying to look at it from a position of humanity and sort of hearts and minds, which we say. So let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about Bronti's background, but I hope it's okay that I tell people how we first met.
Go for it.
And I don't know how long. Do you know how long ago it was? Do you remember when you got your?
I think I was maybe 20, so I'm 28 now. So
okay, so 8 years ago, and it was probably one of my first times I ever taught NALP, and we were in a classroom, which is different than how it's done today. And I specifically remember Bronti because it was your birthday.
It was,
and you were traveling from 45 minutes to an hour away to the class, and back then it was like a 3-day class, and so Bronti was in probably my inaugural class of NALP, and just a memorable human. And then fast forward, I see her resume come in and I'm like, wait, I know this one. And, I have a pretty good memory, always have a pretty good memory. It's a weird skill of mine. And so I like telling that story really quickly, just because it kind of just says, like, in this industry, you just never know. You
so
just
true.
Truly don't ever know. So, but tell me what you've done for the last 8 years. I know what you've done for the last few months, but
sure. So I started off as a leasing agent in Bloomington, Indiana, moved up to an assistant manager, and then was quickly promoted into a leasing portfolio specialist. So basically, I was just helping out a multifamily company with overseeing all of their properties that were struggling with occupancy. So I would be sent there to lease up the property, to help out, the on-site team, anything that they basically needed me to do. So I gained a lot of my experience then and there whenever I was in that position. And as soon as I was ready to transition out, I became a property manager and now am a portfolio support specialist for Gray.
And you got to property manager, and you're like, oh, no. I'm kidding. It's just such a tough job.
It is.
It's just such a tough job. And I don't think I realized, like, you have had the title of, portfolio specialist before. But it is different just because you have to sort of like mechanically, be able to apply similar or the same principles, but in many different places. But remind me, were you in student when you were in Bloomington?
I was not.
That's all we ever think of.
No,
it was not.
I was always in I've never been in student housing.
Yeah.
I've kind of wanted to, get my feet wet with that, but I think I've fallen in love with multifamily whenever I first started, and I've been in it ever since.
Yeah, and wildly enough, one of the properties that we own that we've not even really had that long. I mean, a little bit over a year you worked at before.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah,
Go Echo Park. Yes,
loved,
I
right?
love Echo Park.
Yeah, it is so beautiful. So
it is.
So that particular part of the background, was there a piece of multifamily that you just latched on and loved?
I think I've always been a really people person. So I love working with residents. I love getting to know different people's backgrounds, where they came from, where they're trying to go. So anything that's customer service driven, especially whenever you're able to make such an amazing, living experience for residents and just make that be that difference whenever they're paying their highest bill a month to your company. I think it's a nice part to play. You get to meet so many, great people. Two of my bestest friends now are both from two properties in Bloomington, actually. One was from Echo Park. So yeah, you meet great people and you get great opportunities. So fallen in love with it.
Okay, then. And did you hear her? She said she loves residents.
I sure do.
Yeah. We love residents too. We would have no business. We would have no business without them.
Absolutely.
So before we get into what Bronti does for us, because portfolio support specialists could be anything.
Could be.
It could be anything. And the beautiful thing is, it truly is. Like, she's a utility player. She can do anything. But the role creation here at Gray came about because as just different things changed in the economy, inflation, massive rent growth, the residuals of the massive rent growth, the next step of that logically is starting to see families and people, struggling and, delinquencies being higher. And then, I covered a little bit of this with Jay Beatty on a previous episode, but to the point where some communities can't take care of the current residents because the financial position is so so changed, because it's not just delinquency, like where we're trying to, we would like to close the month out at 2% or at 4%. Like that's not what we're talking about here.
Right.
For sure. And, recognizing the role of a property manager, and also just recognizing that, leasing has to come first. That's the revenue piece. We decided at Gray that we needed this like very special human that could come in and not look at, I almost hate the word delinquency anymore, right?
Right.
Because we assign it to, delinquent, and then that is true. It is, past due. But, the phrasing of that sometimes already just says like negative. And that is the absolute opposite of who you are and why you're so good. But like, I do want to first talk about the humanity of it. Like, we can get to numbers later.
Sure.
Let's talk about the people. And I think what you've done uniquely is like, these folks, their situations. You might know what sort of like was the tipping point. Talk to me about some of the humans, the families,
Sure.
the people that stand out in your mind, and how they find themselves in this spot.
Sure. So before I actually came on board with Gray, I was working for a nonprofit, and I went into that because I really wanted to, work with people that have less opportunities and minorities and so forth. So I have a huge passion for people in general, like I stated before. But I think that I've always been somebody who can understand and walk in other people's shoes, because I have been in those situations whenever I was a younger person. And so I think that a lot of the times with residents, we get so business driven, I guess. Like, a lot of companies get so business driven, and it's like we forget about the people a lot of the time, and that people have real life things that happen to them. So, whenever I was offered this opportunity with Gray, I knew it was for me, because I knew I was going to be able to be that person that could have a conversation with somebody about a rent balance and, make it into something positive, something different, a budgeting, conversation. It could be, anything that they might need to talk about. And we get to a solution that works for both our company and for the resident. And I think that residents are just super important, and like what people go through is really important, and we have to be able to understand that and at least try to understand it. I know that there's some times where, a resident might say, oh, well, I spent all my money on fireworks, so I can't afford my rent.
Right.
So certain things like that, we just have to be able to come in there and say, okay, how can we get you on a better cycle and create a better living experience while you're here at one of Gray Residential's properties? Yeah,
we talk about like pay cadence being so misaligned with, rent cadence. Like, we, regimented this, first of the month, everything has to be in. And if someone is, living, the phrasing obviously is paycheck to paycheck. Everybody understands that phrasing. So it's like, if that is the case, and even today it came up in that interview, someone said something about, well, they didn't get paid until a certain, this resident didn't get paid till a certain day. And so they just always paid the late fees. And, it's like, it's kind of heartbreaking. Like, we understand late fees. We obviously are trying to motivate people to pay on time, but then what we're actually doing is at some point probably contributing to them being in a place where they are now vulnerable in their housing, depending on and it's not like anybody has, dropped their late fees. Everybody's increased late fees over time.
Yeah.
I feel like when I started, it was like $25 and now it's like 75, to 100.
Exactly.
But interesting. You said like, like they're people like, and their experience matters all the way through.
Absolutely.
We can't just focus on their prospect experience and then their move-in experience, and then let it stop and think that this isn't part of their experience. This is part of their experience. The toughest times are actually when we're supposed to be the best, really, really good at it for sure. What gets people other than fireworks? I know. What gets people, to that place where it's truly the difference between I can pay my rent and I can't. Like, what are some of the things that maybe some people can't imagine, but that as you actually start to think about it can make a big difference?
Sure. So what I've seen, just with working with various residents at various properties, I've seen health concerns. That's a big one. Vehicles breaking down, which is their way of getting to work. So how are they supposed to work without a working vehicle?
Yeah.
So that money for rent that they might have saved could go to their vehicle, and how they can make their money is by driving. So I think that there's a number of things that can happen in anybody's life that can, cause them not to be able to be in a financial situation that they can pay in full even. I know that there are some companies out there that most companies, request that the rent payment is made in full. And sometimes that's not realistic for a lot of residents because of health concerns. Maybe their child got sick and they missed a week of work. So we have to be able to, be the difference. And I think that's what we're trying to create here, is that we are trying to be a more understanding company in general. And just, someone that can hear these people, listen to learn and not listen to respond, is how I always like to say it, is that I'm listening to learn from these people. And what can we do for the next resident to make sure that we are, being, different in this industry and more accommodating to these people.
Yeah. Curious, not furious. I heard
Correct.
that on a podcast yesterday morning.
Yeah, I love that.
Early in the morning. And I was like, ooh, I need to write that down. I don't think I did write it down, but I'm glad I remembered it. Yeah. I was like, approach, and I've heard people say approach with curiosity before, but I liked like curious, not furious.
Absolutely.
As it pertains to like the work that you're doing. And also just the, and I think it happens if you've been in the business a long time. And also there's some books out there that talk about this too, like the assumption of mismanagement of money, the assumption of dishonesty.
Sure.
Like if someone calls and says like, my car broke down, I couldn't get to work, I couldn't pay my rent. There are some operators out there that would either A, not care, or B, not think that it's true. But in your experience, and you're obviously talking straight to people, like it's true.
Yeah.
Maybe not 100%.
And
right?
even if it's not true, I think it's just like, going the extra mile to sit down with these residents and say, okay, so we're at this point. When is it going to be realistic for you to be able to make a payment in full? Like, is it going to be by the 16th of the month, the day after we're supposed to be filing for eviction? Those certain things, as long as the resident is communicating with me, with the on-site team, I think that's what's most important, is that we're understanding, where they're coming from. What can we do to help so we can keep them housed, so we can keep a good start to anybody's life is housing, food resources, clothing, making sure that they have the basic necessities to keep going.
Yeah. And it's not like it's a secret anywhere that, about affordable housing, attainable housing. It's not like the answer is just like, well, but we've got programs. There's Section 8, or there's this. Like anybody know how many people are on the waiting list for those? I should have looked that up before this.
Yeah, I think it's, from what I checked last, it's
or it's just closed.
Yeah. And they said it's like being drawn for the lottery to get Section 8 now. So it's a long wait list, and there's not a ton of affordable housing in Indianapolis in general, number one. But so we have to, as we're, wanting these rents that we're, charging for the rentals, which are beautiful that we have.
Yeah.
We also need to be able to be that company that makes the difference of coming in there, speaking to the resident, and again, making sure that their experience throughout the entire residency is something different. And even if they, wind up at the very end of their lease and they can't pay their last $100, maybe that they know they can be more comfortable coming to us afterwards and saying, hey, I know I've got that $100 balance and I know it's 6 months later, but I'm ready to take care of it now. And that comfort level has already been created while they were living there.
Yeah. And I think, math has to play into it at some point. Humans aren't numbers, they aren't. But I mean, we can also do analyses on our side of like, what happens when we work with people and where is the win-win. We use the phrase win-win a lot, or I do anyway. And so it's like, eviction filing is expensive, court costs are expensive, attorney fees are expensive. And then to actually, it all ends up bad debt. And so then it all ends up vacancy loss or possibly damages. You have to turn it, you have to relet it. And then depending on how good we are at what we do, we might get a tenant that falls into those other things already. So I think what you're doing is as much about the existing, and now you've learned, and I think that you just come up with the best things, communication wise about like how to front load and be ready, and what programs we have to offer, and what sort of like thought process, and people can kind of commit to, okay, well, I can do this pay cadence and it works, and whatever that looks like. But what are some other reasons that people get behind that I would say, the affluent or the privileged could never even imagine would be the reason why someone couldn't? Like, recently,
I think like one of the most common things that I hear is job loss. And unfortunately, even, losing your job in the first place is something super negative. But we also have to think about those people out there that are working full time but making $12 an hour. And so realistically paying, do they even qualify 3 times of the rent, even though they're living there at that point? But 3 times the rent on $12 an hour is not enough. That's not going to make it on top of gas and food and, hygiene products and everything that you need on a monthly basis. So I think that, number one, making sure that a resident can find something that's actually rewarding and can actually take care of their monthly bills that they need, their car payment, their car insurance, those things, and making sure that that they have those opportunities. And that's why each month we create a resource list that is sent out to these residents, and they can, touch base with many different resources. Maybe they can connect them with a new job opportunity that's actually going to make working worthwhile, making sure that they can keep a roof over their head because of what they're making. And then I think that also a lot of the times, like I said, is healthcare. There is extremely huge healthcare expenses for some people, and for some people that don't even have medical insurance, that they're paying out of pocket, and then they don't have money left over for rent. So there are huge things that can happen in people's lives that can really affect their ability to pay rent, their ability to keep, a healthy lifestyle continuing. So, yeah.
And we could, I think you and I both, we've had these conversations before, but it's like we could talk about all the sort of fundamental building blocks, or rather destruction blocks, if you will, that get, like you said, like healthcare, the cost to take care of yourself, the grocery costs. Like you see people on TikTok or whatever posting that, like, 2 years ago, this is what, my grocery money bought me, and then like you see a counter with like 6 things on it, and it's like, that's today. And that's a nuisance for some people depending on their circumstances. And that is how do you can't go to your family and say, I'm gonna have to stop feeding you. Like groceries went up, I'm going to have to stop feeding you. And I'm sure statistically speaking, there will be people that'll be like, well, wage growth is, whatever. And I know that those numbers mean something. I'm certainly not mocking, any of those like reports, but the difference here is that Bronti, you're face to face. And have you at this point gone through people's, are they transparent enough with you to actually go through, like, this is what my bills are?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I the greatest thing is that residents actually ask for that. At some of our properties, we have a huge language barrier. And I don't think that there has ever been a time that's been carved out to sit down with these people that speak various languages and to explain to them, this is what you're signing. And, the entire lease packet is translate it in English, I believe. I think that you can translate it in various languages.
Well, we
but
really can't. I don't want to say can't, but I mean, like, you know, they need to sign the, and we use like the NAA Blue Moon lease.
Yeah.
Like it's, you know, I don't know at what point landlords, you know, should be or might need to or be forced to or want to or whatever, use whatever phrasing you want, you know, translate those documents. How many, we do translate non-lease documents.
Correct.
How many, how has that worked out?
It's been great so far. So just in August, just this month right now, we have, you know, sent out an August promotion for rent. So we're allowing any residents that pay by the 6th of the month to be entered to win a $200 gift card. So something as simple as that, you would think it'd be very simple and it'd just be like a one flyer. That needs to be in, you know, various languages so that everyone of the community can understand and also be able to participate in things like that, you know, whenever events are going on or community resident events are happening, residents want to be able to participate in that. But, you know, going back to the breakdown of charges with people, I think that once I get to that point with the resident and they're like, I'm not understanding, I don't understand how I've gotten to this. I thought my rent was $700 and that was it. And then once we actually have that opportunity to sit down and I say, well, hey, here's your utilities and what they're going to average. Here's your water and sewer is going to vary every month. So once we get to that understanding is whenever we can get on a better cycle, because people have to know what they're paying for in order for them to start paying the correct amount. So that was one thing that we did have to, you know, I had to climb over a little bit, was that I had to make sure that the residents knew what they were paying for and understood it. I don't ever want anybody to feel, or resident-wise to feel, you know, like they don't understand what's going on. They deserve that. They deserve respect, and they deserve to be listened to and heard, and make sure that we're following up on things for them.
And I think, too, that's one of the places that you found, like, the front-loading that comprehension, just hopeful that people, you know, don't fall into that place where, you know, they just have a balance because they just didn't understand. Or, like, I think, you know, and there's other stuff like RUBS.
Yeah.
Those variable costs that come out, and, you know, it's possible when people come from, you know, other places that's not commonplace, or maybe the last place they were at, they had flat rate water, sewer. And so in their mind, you know, that's the price, this is the price. And obviously if we had a nickel for every time, you know, a resident came in and was like, you didn't tell me that, you know, and we always try to work through, we've been tackling those issues since day one of multifamily. I don't know when that was exactly, but I mean, like, I'm sure we've been tackling some of that, but I mean, like, I think the reality behind the language barrier and the translation tools, you know, that are available. And I think some operators think like, oh, for fair housing, if I'm not translating into all the languages, then I'm discriminating, and I'm not doing that. And I mean, I could certainly argue that the spirit of fair housing is supposed to be, you know, about inclusion. And if you are excluding everyone except the English, you know, people that English is their primary language, I think you've lost the spirit of fair housing. You know, for us, we look at it and go, okay, you know, as we get requests or as we can identify requests, you know, we have a large Haitian population, you know, certainly Spanish, very commonplace. I don't know what else you've experienced. I just know in particular areas of the city, those are obviously really common. But I mean, folks, there's tools out there. There's tools. What are the tools that you use?
So for flyer generation, if you have a Canva Pro account, it's $15 a month. So if your community can budget that, and for you, for
annually,
your team,
it's cheaper. I think it's cheaper.
$120 maybe. Maybe something around
something
that.
Like that.
You can actually, there's this wonderful tool on there that you can translate into any language. So any flyer, anything that you're creating, that is a very simple tool to do it that way. But we have been lucky enough to actually have a translator on site at one of our properties, and she speaks 5 languages. So she's been, extremely helpful with being able, I can get the content generated for, what my plans are for tackling delinquency that month. And then having her be able to come in and actually make it make sense, so it doesn't sound like an AI or a robot.
Yeah.
I think it's really wonderful that we have her as well. So she's able to contribute such a large part that, I lack. I don't speak 5 languages.
Yeah.
I wish I did, but
I speak 1.
Yeah, me too.
2, if you count my dialect of Alexis from Schitt's Creek, because I'm convinced that's also kind of another language, and I love that show, and I do that a lot. But game changer. I think the point is Bronti as a human is a game changer. The fact that we're a company that's looking at it and just saying, and it's not like there's nothing in it for us, right? This is us saying we have to find and strike a balance between, what owners expect out of an asset and an investment, and how to accomplish that. And how to accomplish that actually is to do all these things we're doing for the humans. That is how we accomplish it.
Absolutely.
But it keeps them housed. I think that's the phrasing I probably use the most. I want people housed and stable.
Absolutely.
Housed and stable. And how can we keep them housed and stable? And I think the translating tools and taking those steps, key texting also, it's not really a commercial fee for key texting. It just happened that way. But I know that we had someone come to Evansville last week from Vietnam. Okay. And the leasing associate, they're sitting right here. They're on their phone. She's on her computer. They're smiling and nodding. Everybody's, very, they're still engaging each other. And there's these affirmations. But she did an entire leasing presentation, in Vietnamese. And then, they leased. And look what we did. We took the steps to make sure that they felt as welcome as we could reasonably do Absolutely. It. And so and that's the spirit of fair housing. And so I just, I wanted to bring that up because there is someone in their car listening or something that's just saying, well, we can't do that. And it's no, you can't not do it.
I think that going the extra mile, I think a lot of people will find very rewarding sometimes. I think that if you're passionate about what you're doing and you go in there with a smile on your face every day and you really try your best to make a difference, if that's what you're wanting to do in your life, I think you have a little bit more drive to do the translations, to make sure you're meeting with residents. So I serve, the entire portfolio for Gray. And so there's times that I have to go on the east side of Indianapolis to Bloomington to, wherever, work remote some days. Woohoo. I know. But, you just have to be passionate about it. You have to be passionate about people, about your residents, and about creating this experience that, whether they renew their lease or whether they walk away, they can say, I know that Gray Residential was one of those companies that just made the difference. They helped me. They connected me with these resources. I was in an eviction. They were able to get me out of that and not have that on my record. That's really important. Whenever I hear about one of our residents going into an actual eviction, once we're at that point, that's not the ending point for me. I want to contact them and I want to say, hey, what can we do? How can we help? Can I provide you with resources? Are you able to, talk to a family member? Do you understand, what this process that, what this entails? An eviction on your record can make it somewhat nearly impossible to rent at a kind of decent place, I guess. I mean, I'm not sure on the exact places all around that do and don't accept them, but
I haven't talked to a professionally managed landlord yet that is just nah, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
Exactly. So it's important that they understand how much that this can actually hurt them in the long run. And
which is obviously why the courts, that's why there's the, diversion programs Absolutely. That are there. And then that's also why, there are sort of, those I'm going to call it slim opportunities to have it, removed from your record. I mean, there's a lot of qualifiers that get to that point, and certainly advocates would like to say look, just because this person had this moment in time doesn't make them, just a complete loss, I guess. But that is truly what can happen. That is absolutely what can happen. That was one of my questions I had. You do very intensive work with with people in terms of just, communication, conversations, budget counseling. Maybe you do even more kinds of counseling. I don't know. But like, how do you know when it's like when I don't want to say when is enough, and it's not really a policy question. It's just sort of like,
Sure.
What's the turning point where, like, we have to head to the courts. We have to at least protect ourselves from the future possession wise, and we have to head to the courts.
Sure. So I think that point is there for me whenever I don't get any communication. And whenever I say no communication, that's not me just calling them one time and leaving a message.
Yeah.
That is a text message, an email, a phone call, a door delivery, notice, get in contact with me. There's various ways that I try to reach out to these residents to give them every opportunity to, try and stay housed. And I think that whenever the communication is just not there, they, maybe they don't care. I don't want to assume that, but maybe they have bigger things going on. Maybe they don't have the time to reach out, and that's fine. But that moment that there's just no communication on what's happening is really like, I can't go anywhere more from there. I need to be able to understand what's going on, to be able to help you and support you, and get you connected to resources, a team member, whatever needs to happen.
Yeah. Does anyone ever just flat out say, I'm not paying. I don't want to pay you. I'm not paying you. Like, where it feels more like where it reads more like a choice than just necessity.
Sure. There are times like that. I don't really feel like anyone is, any residents have been very direct, like, I'm not paying my rent. But I will say that there are times whenever a resident is highly upset and they don't feel like they've been heard from the on-site team. Mm-hmm. And so at the point that I reach them, they're at an elevated point and they're like, I've not gotten a phone call back about this. I don't want to talk about my balance because I've not, this has not been addressed, and I want to know what's going on with my AC. I don't want to talk to you about what the $1,000 that's due.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, just always listening to learn and not listening to respond. I'm always listening to learn from residents. And okay, I hear that you're really upset about your AC. Let me try to get you an update on that before we close today. And then let's go back and let's revisit this conversation, let's say tomorrow, after I get you an update on this. So then I reach them, and whenever they're in a, more clear headspace, and that they can actually be like, okay, here's what my budget actually really, realistically is. So
I think that's a great tip.
Yeah.
That you don't press on in the moment, because it's not going to be heard.
Exactly. And just pushing somebody whenever they're already at a 10, my goal is to bring them down to a 2, and not from a 2 to a 10. So every time that somebody is that highly upset, whenever I think about it, if your AC is not working, if that's what the person is calling in about, or whenever I'm talking to them, and it's 97 degrees out, I don't think I'd want to be talking about my balance due either. So I'm going to, touch base with the on-site team. I'll try to find some update, and whether it's like, hey, we've got a portable AC coming to them right now, then I can follow up with them that day, and then I can revisit that conversation. But it's best to just hear them out, understand why they're actually highly upset, why they don't want to talk about it, because normally it's not me, who they've never met face to face.
Yeah.
But it's more of, they want to be heard. I mean, 99.9% of the time I am positive about that, is that people from on-site teams to residents want to be heard about what is going on, what they can do going forward to make their experience on both ends better. They just want to be heard.
Yeah. And I think, like, when you said your goal is to bring it down to a 2, I mean, there's techniques obviously for that. Some people slow their speech down and they get a little bit quieter and slower. And, there's all kinds of things, but I can tell you what the anti-technique would be to say, well, ma'am, according to the tenant's rights sheet, you can't withhold your rent for things that we have. And also, air conditioning's it doesn't deem the unit uninhabitable. And in fact, in your lease, it says it's not even an emergency. So, so that was the anti-technique to
not the great way
diffusing,
to do it.
But I 100% could guess that there are site teams that are instructed to use language like that.
Sure.
And if it doesn't feel good to say it, then it may not be the best way, is all I'm going to say. But I guarantee there are people out there that say, according to tenants' rights, you have to keep paying. And there's a way to there's a way to do that and a way to say it. And sometimes you get to that point, but I think just the fact that you're just like, you do say, and what you conceptually said is, I want your needs met first. I want your needs met first. And you didn't say it, but you say it. And then you come back in. And then also it's like, okay, well, that argument's gone. Can we just talk about your rent now?
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's not an argument. I think that's the other thing. It's like, we look at it as this very adversarial, conversation. And I think too, like, you literally run into the fire. Like, you just sent out a notice to everybody that said, this is when I'll be at your property. These are the times. Like, basically you're like a professor with office hours. Like,
I know, right?
Yeah. You're like, these are my office hours. And you are welcoming to the maximum conversations about delinquency. Whereas I think, I'm not naming any names necessarily, but like, maybe back in the day, I saw an assistant manager that would hide from it. Sometimes literally, see someone coming and be like, I'm going to the back room. I'm going to the workroom. I'm going to the bathroom, to avoid it.
Sure.
And that's wrong.
Yeah. And I will say that, like, probably year one in the industry, I don't know if I'd be as comfortable, approaching these types of conversations.
Have you ever hid under a desk?
No.
I did one time, but it wasn't because of delinquency.
Too many cameras were installed in those offices by that point.
This is way before camera. We didn't have any of that.
But no, I think that just in general is just making sure that, where I'm at right now and being able to talk to residents about these balances. And I'm coming from a very understanding place because, I think that everybody has struggled financially, at least for 1 month of their life, if not more. And so I think that, how would you feel, if somebody was to say to you, well, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you actually had to go to the hospital, this month. So your car payment is due. You want to make sure that, for me at least, I really go in there just with a mindset of like, I want to keep this person here. I want to keep this resident here. I want to make sure that they feel that way too. And that they want to pay their rent, that they don't feel like, oh, I'm not doing this. I don't want to be here anyway. I'm going to go. And that's just not my goal.
I'm going to stay as long as I can and make them kick me out before I go. There's that other piece too of like, I don't know if the empathy is reciprocal, but like, if you've treated them with dignity, if you've treated, this situation with dignity the entire time, that when it's time to, exit, whatever that looks like, is it easier? And I don't, statistically speak, I don't even know if we have enough numbers for it, but sure. Is that person more likely to get out by the writ date? And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that, we've had some major success at one of our properties. Am I allowed to name it in this? Maybe not. But
I don't do what you want. Yeah. Go
okay.
ahead.
So Crosswinds.
Okay.
We've had some major success there with like the amount of evictions. We were first placing, maybe back February, March to now. And I think that they were really struggling with people getting out exactly on the writ date. And more times now we're seeing people actually vacating before that date. And I think that that's because, in those conversations that I have with people that have evictions, that are in an eviction, I definitely make them aware. Do you know, have you gotten, this USPS, or has a sheriff been by, or things like that? If not, this is what your court date is and what time it is. It's not like, I know that you're more likely to win if a resident doesn't show up at court. If they just, do not show up and we get a possession date automatically.
Well, I don't know if anyone's winning.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
Understood. Like, where it's uncontested at that point.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that. But I think that once we're at that point, that we're there and we're talking to them, and I want to make sure that people are, educated on what's going to be happening during these times. And I think that residents have rights. I know that they have rights. And I want them to understand that it is their right, in this process, to understand what's going on. They don't need to be, they don't need to be in the unknown about the process.
Yeah.
They should be able to still ask questions.
Right.
And, we've had probably within the last 3 months, almost, if I'm not incorrect, I want to say it's almost about 8 residents actually, stay and pay, and they were in an eviction, which is a huge success.
And 8 is a huge number.
It is.
Especially when you think about, I'd have to turn it. I'd have to lease it again. And also we kept 8 families housed.
Exactly.
8 of them, that community has large floor plans, two bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. It's oftentimes a family. And so 8 families housed, like, is just like round of applause. Yeah. Let's go. Whether that's just a financial metric of excitement for someone, and then it's like a human metric for us. Like, okay, 8 people, stayed, and we didn't have the financial like residual impact of that. And I think too, and I could be wrong about this, but like we are communicating with the courts what we are doing. Like, we're basically like the pre-diversion diversion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
if there is, and if there is such a thing. But I just remember when, when we started this, it was like, well, make sure the judge knows all the things we've done. And has that changed anything in the court setting that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, just because I'm not involved in actually like physically going to the court. Whenever those eviction cases are up.
Yeah.
I'm just involved in, filing, helping the on-site teams put documents in, and whatever Landman and Beatty might be, needing for their upcoming cases.
Well, I know Jay said that we're, crushing it. Just the fact that we're talking about this, doing something about it that is creative or different, even down to having the translator. And it's not like she's a full-time employee. There's going to be people that listen to this and are just like, well, where does the budget come from for all these people? Like, you have the on-site staff, and then, a portion of what Bronti does, obviously, logically so. And, it's like, rethink those other places where you, and this is me speaking to operators, like, rethink the places that you'd give a courtesy officer a concession to provide a service.
Absolutely.
Like, we're just looking at sort of like services that are only needed sometimes, limited services, and like think of that conceptually, how that can work out. Because game changer.
Absolutely.
Game changer having Christy. And also, just like cultural awareness and cultural excitement.
Yes, absolutely.
Like learning things, maybe trying some new food.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Learning more about what too, like the mindset is, like even just down to like, where one resident might be complaining and be like, oh, they're all loitering. But like, actually that's like, it's gathering, it's community. But someone's looking at it as loitering, and you just work through all of it, obviously. But,
sure.
You ask yourself, like, okay, so do I need to give people a place to gather? Like, that's probably what I need to do. Not, get fussy about and send a lease violation letter and be like, you cannot loiter.
Right.
You have to have the right people, hearts and minds, is what Spencer would say. You just have to have hearts and minds in there. What I wrote, explain your magic. I don't even know if that's possible, but, what advice do you have for site team members who are responsible for delinquency who, don't necessarily have intensive assistance like you have? And I think they all are going to be saying, well, I do call and I do send letters and, whatever. But like, what's your magic? What do you think your magic is?
Loving people.
Oh, gosh, you're so sweet.
Honestly, this
is Friday morning or Friday afternoon, by the way. So she's, everybody's in a light mood. Like, we love people. No, I think you do. I actually think you do.
It's true. And it's, I think that's what creates my magic, is that, I was raised by, my mother, and she taught me that, you always say hello to people, no matter what they look like. If someone says hello to you, you walk right past. You don't have to strike up a whole conversation, but you are to acknowledge them. And so I think that it's humble roots, and honestly also, meeting these residents, talking to them, whether I don't meet them in person. But I think that I can really, really, really understand a lot of the times I can kind of call it whenever somebody's really actually going through a struggle, who's going to actually seek out resources and who's not interested at all. And they're just like, I'm going to pay on the 28th, and I'm not going to pay on the 1st, but I'm going to pay on the 28th instead. But I think that, part of the magic is also being organized, auditing files, understanding what charges. So whenever a resident comes in and says, I want to know what my monthly charges are, being able to pull that up, being able to explain those in detail to people so that they understand.
Yeah. I don't think we're like sneaky, but I do think that there's legitimately charges on people's ledgers
That can be confusing.
That are disclosed in the lease agreement, but that aren't like widely and strongly known and understood, like renter's insurance.
Right.
Back in the day, we didn't have the power to just charge people for it. If they didn't have it, you just started, you sent notices. And
right. It was optional whenever I first started in the industry. It was a total optional thing.
Yeah.
Now it's required.
Yeah.
In most places.
Yeah. And then past required, it's like, no, we're charging you.
Right.
And I think that is sort of, I don't want to say it's a failure on the part of the landlord, but like when you're talking about going through charges, I think there will be people listening that are just like, well, they know their charges. I gave them a move-in statement, or we did this during the quoting, but it's like, it's not enough, is it?
No. And it's also just, consistently following up with residents. Like if they're saying that they're confused about their charges, it's not that they're saying it to, bug you or take more time out of your day. It's because that they might be confused. So, it takes 2 minutes to generate an email that says your rent is this. You pay for trash this much. You pay for water and sewer. That varies every month. You have your admin fee. Here's what that is. Being able to explain those in a way that residents understand it.
Yeah.
I think is important. So that's part of the magic for sure. Just honestly, and I love auditing.
Just loving people.
Yeah. Loving people, loving what you do. I mean, having a passion for what you do is, I think, one of the most important things in the world, and how lucky I feel to be in a position that I feel so passionate about. I love multifamily. I do love residents. I love on-site teams. I love working with people of all different backgrounds, all different experience and skill sets. There's something that I learn from a manager almost every time I visit, on site. And it's one of the most amazing things about this industry in general, that it's
You're like
constant.
a Care Bear. You're like multifamily bear.
Oh, well,
I don't even know. You're like, definitely like a Care Bear.
Sure.
I'm just going to roll back to earlier. You said at some point, like you were, we've all been in some kind of moment where we, don't have all that we need or don't have all that we like sometimes. But I mean, like perspective is huge. And this is very short soapbox, I think. Read some books, people. Like if you are listening to Bronti and you can't necessarily, think of a time where you can relate to the squeeze, I can't buy that, or you have to look at your kid and say, we can't afford that, like whatever those moments were. But if you've never had a moment like that, if you can't remember a moment like that, it's probably time to read some books.
Yeah.
Just to understand.
Or talk to some residents.
Or talk to some residents through the lens of curiosity.
Absolutely.
And to listen, to understand, seek to understand, and be curious. But
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's just like, there's no way.
Right.
Like, that can't be it. School supplies can't be the reason you can't pay your rent. And it's like, it can.
Yeah, there's real barriers out there for a lot of people, and and a lot of people, from minority backgrounds too, not having the same opportunities from, generational wealth for a lot of people has not been something that's been created and as a long running thing. So I think that, not having, a lot of people don't have even the opportunity to go to college sometimes. I mean, a lot of the times actually. So, there are people out here that are still minimum wage. Correct me if I'm wrong, is $7.25 in Indiana.
Hasn't changed in years and years and years.
So if you want to walk in anyone else's shoes, one example you could do is just imagine making $7.25, working the same hours that you do right now, and trying to make all the bills that you have work. Everyone has bills, and I think that it's important that we care about what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just, it's like when we talk about people's ability to pay and propensity to pay, and it's like, well, they got in, they make 3 times the rent. And it's just like, look, everybody's 3 times the rent is so different in terms of bills, in terms of debt, in terms of what they're trying to pay off, and then, there's a couple resources I think I personally that changed me, some books that changed me in the relative recent past. One of them is called Poverty by America.
Okay.
And it is talking just about like the design of it. It's not so circumstantial or so like this person makes a bad choice and this person makes a good choice, and that's how they land where they are. But if you're someone that's listening to some of this and like, trying to take a step back and get some perspective, I would say that one. I'll put it in the comments. I'll put some of those resources in the comments because that one is good. Also, How the Other Half Banks was really good. And just to try to understand what it costs people to use their own money when they maybe can't get a bank account.
Oh, yeah.
When they are using, pay advance programs of some sort. And, I think it said that, it's basically like the poorest people have to pay the most to use their money because there's, banks don't want those sort of low balance accounts because they can't make any money off of it.
Right.
And so even some of that is like, don't think for a second that like 3 times the rent and you think where did all those other dollars go? And it's like, well, those other dollars went a lot of different places, and sometimes it literally went nowhere. Sometimes it went in the pocket of, fringe lenders or whatever. I do, there are programs like that can be very helpful, like a Flex. Yeah. And I think it's okay to talk about it for sure, because personally, I just love that concept. In fact, I love the concept so much that, well, first of all, we partner with them on all the properties, but what we learned really quickly is that, while many people can qualify for it, not everybody can qualify for it. And so the places that, for a variety of reasons, people weren't qualifying for it, all of a sudden they didn't have the benefit of that. So I can pay my mortgage in 2 payments and I can balance and budget myself, but they can't.
Right.
And it's like, well, how are we going to help? But we're trying.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about? Rent split?
Oh, I would love to.
Okay.
So that's a great program that Gray Residential introduced for their residents of their properties. It's a program that allows residents to break their monthly rent and charges payment over 2 installments or payments, if you will. So one would be due on the 1st of the month. The first payment is due on the 1st of the month. The second payment is due on the 15th of the month. And they don't get any late fees as long as they make their payments on time. And it also just, in general, just helps people because it's more similar to a pay schedule. So you're not paying, $1,400, out of the first of the month.
Yeah.
That's hard. That would be hard for someone like me even. I mean, that's really difficult, and that is a big bill. So I think that with this rent split, and the great thing is that all residents are eligible. They can all qualify for it. It is available for everybody. As long as your balance is at a 0, you can sign up for the following month, and then you have that opportunity. That is something that we're I guess I put it in air quotes, but reintroducing to our residents, and making that available, making sure that residents know that this program exists, because it can really help them, not continuing down the cycle of paying late, getting hit with a late fee, maybe getting sent up for an eviction, then getting hit with the legal bill back fee. I mean, there are so many fees, and with this rent split program, it just allows for a lot more budgeting opportunity in general too for residents.
And privilege.
Yes.
Like, I'm privileged because I can choose my pay cadence. I can choose the exact date that I want that to come out of my bank account. I have that ability, but landlords don't give that privilege to anyone. And also, like, late fees, just like, it's a ruse. It's fake money because it comes in as income and then it goes out as bad debt. So like, what's the point? What was the point? And then we hurt people in the middle of it, and I'm not saying that there's not room for, income, but late fees is supposed to be a motivator. And if if it's not a choice, then it doesn't matter. What I mean? It never really mattered. But I just, I wanted to bring those couple of resources up because they were really helpful to me as we've been talking and just, sitting at the table and going, Bronti, what do we do? How do we do this? And, just trying to be in as many shoes as we can. I was going to say, I have a question on here, but I feel like you already answered it. It was like, what keeps you going? Because like on the outside looking in, and we say it in here too, we're like, man, that must be really exhausting. Must be like, and maybe mentally exhausting. Like, how do you stay up you know, when most of your job is talking to people that are hurting, need help, you know, whatever. How you stay up?
Sure. So, I mean, I think that the main thing for me is that even if it's one resident out of the entire month that sits there and says to me, I have never lived at a place that has ever offered this type of opportunity for me to avoid an eviction, for somebody to work with me and provide resources, makes all the difference in the world to me. And even if it's one person that we're helping, you know, severely, like really giving them the opportunity to continue going and to continue having positivity, continue having stability. It's what keeps me going. I mean, I know that one resident might sound small, but you know, out of like 100 something, but I think that it's very rewarding to hear that we're actually, what we're doing, and this, you know, this entire position that was created is actually working, and it is actually, we're seeing the benefits. We are seeing residents getting on a better pay cycle. We are seeing residents be able to stay housed. I mean, that's the overall goal, you know, to stay housed, to stay where they live, to keep their family, you know, happy and healthy and all of that. So, you know, and also just like in general for me, I mean, having an opportunity in general to work for a company that, like Gray Residential, is a blessing for me. I mean, anybody who has a job.
You are always so grateful. Like, she'll thank us like in a meeting. Like, it'll be the end of a meeting. Like, I think we had a call even earlier this week, and you're just like, just thank you. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. An opportunity. I mean, it's like there are. I mean, I do not carry a college education. I mean, I went to college. I did not graduate.
Same.
And so I always say, you know,
loud and proud.
Yeah.
Same.
And you know, I always was told, you know, if you don't have a college degree, you're not going to do anything. You're you know, and it's just like I walk in here, you know, I feel confident. I feel, you know, intelligent. I feel very supported. And I think it's very rewarding to work with a group of people, especially like someone like you, that I can learn and grow from. I mean, for me, it just, there is so much more than just, you know, what I'm doing on the day to day. There is so much more that keeps me motivated and keeps me going personally and professionally, that, in general, I mean, it is just, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to even be having a position like this. I mean, I've never worked for a company that has ever created a position that works with residents on paying their balance and keeping them housed, and to have a passion also coming from a nonprofit background. Yeah. You know, very humanitarian work. So like, starting working here and being able to have those same opportunities is wonderful. I mean, it's nothing short of wonderful for me. I love what I'm doing, and I'm excited to be in a position where I am helping people.
Well, I love that you said, you know, basically one by one. So it's like, if it's just one resident a month that expresses gratitude and is able to come out of a, you know, maybe a darker space or a darker time where they're not sure, you know, where they're putting their kids on the bus next. Like, as it really can get down to that sometimes. Like, everything we do is one by one. Our occupancy grows one by one. Yeah. Our renewals grow one by one. If our joy, you know, if we could really just get down to it and say, well, no, like, the joy here is one by one, maybe we'd be a lot just happier, even in our offices and in our world. 'Cause I do think that we, as an industry, probably struggle sometimes to stay up and look at one by one. You know, some people have it like innately. I'm a very like, we'll solve it person, but I'm not sure that I see like the one by one joys, and like we can all adopt that from Bronti. You know, just remember it. Like, everything happened one by one. So if it's one person that month, but you've made major strides. Like, there have been months where we've filed on 10 people, 12 people, or 10 families, 12 families. We might be impacting 40 people in that. Yes. And like, so when we're looking at a report or having a call and it says like, hey, we filed on 4, we're like, winning, you know, right. I mean, because like, that's hard work to get there. And like, I just looked at some numbers, you know, for one of the other properties that we have, and like year over year, we closed out July 31st, which was yesterday, right? What did they say? Oh, August 2nd. So obviously I looked at it a couple of days ago. It was down 45%. The delinquency, we're talking chunks of money, impactful money on financials. Not like, oh, where do I see that on the variance? No, like with a spotlight is where you see it. And so like, you know, that is the difference. That is the difference that you've made, and that you've made. So, last question, and we've covered it, but I think there's a this is just globally. This isn't at Gray.
Okay.
This is a general statement, but like if you could wave your magic wand, like what would you change about, you know, housing, affordability, programming, et cetera, to, you know, strike the balance and keep properties profitable, but also keep people housed? Do you have any like maybe this is the start of your career in politics? I don't know. What are your just like hopes and dreams?
I think that, you know, hopes and dreams wise, I think that I would love to see more affordable options, housing options in general. You know, working for that nonprofit, I felt like we were one of the only places that offered affordable housing in Indianapolis, and our wait list was upwards of 500 or more people, you know. So
and these were single family home,
and we only
rentals.
had 79 units.
Yeah.
So we're a very small player in that affordable housing field. So I think that in general, you know, all over the world, I'm sure that I know that it's needed as affordable housing options, and that are, you know, clean and nice and still provide an amazing experience for somebody no matter their income. I think that's extremely important. I'd love to see that one day. I also think that if I could change anything about housing, it's just that I wish that, you know, we could have more time to carve out to have more one-on-ones with people that there was more time in a day. I guess that'd be something.
Yeah.
Not that like everybody wants to work more, like, oh yes, let's sign me up for 12 hours every day. Not anything like that, but I just wish that there were more opportunities and less interruptions for especially on-site teams to be able to get to know their community members and be able to help them in various ways. Like, you know, I'm assigned to this job. I love this job, and they don't have the ability to work full time on just delinquency. They are busy. They are
other tasks.
They are putting out fires all day long, and so they don't have a lot of time to sit there and say, how can I really, you know, what can we do to really help? And how can we help you? Whether that's helping the person actually, you know, look at the resources. What if they don't know how to navigate the site? What if they feel uncomfortable calling? Maybe they don't speak fluent English, and the place that they're calling is English, and they feel, you know, a little bit like, oh, you don't want to do it because they can't understand what's going on. So having more time in the day would be, I mean, beautiful.
Isn't it interesting though, like just as an industry, it's, you know, and I'm not saying there's like two schools of thought necessarily, but there's a whole group of probably people or vendors or whatever that are trying to figure out and hone in on like how to do, well, we already know they're working on how to do, you know, get from A to B with less humans, which would make, you know, but then on the flip side, or not necessarily on the flip side, hopefully congruent with, you know, trying to figure out like what of those tasks are making people too busy to have the conversation that you're talking about. Because I've also said before, if we take out all of what you're talking about, this job will stink. You know, like people that feel it in their heart or that love leasing or that love people, like we need that. We need that. And so it's like, how about, you know, we figure out how to get rid of some of the mechanics that are busy, you know, keeping people, and I think the industry trying to do it. I'm not saying like, no, but obviously there's lots and lots of different people out there. Everyone's selling some version of, you know, AI or whatever. And I'm just like, well, how about we work on HI a little bit, right? Like human intelligence, but also just like, you know, the connection piece, because it's not going to work for every community in this country to get rid of, you know, to have no office hours, to have no office, to centralize to the point where what you are proving to us every day is successful is extinct. It's like, you know, that's not going to work. That's just not going to work. And so, you know, that's where sometimes too, like I'm seeing things on, you know, LinkedIn or sites where everybody's just like, well, we're centralizing. And I'm not saying that there's not a piece of it that should be, but we should ask ourselves like where we should be doing that and where it's going to hurt us, because otherwise, if you didn't exist and you weren't doing this, absolutely site teams would have less time to do it, you know what I mean? Or they wouldn't dedicate time to it. It's not a fun conversation.
Right.
I don't think anybody would say it's fun. You maybe, because you like to come out the other side of it successfully. But, you know, I don't know. I just, that is a little bit, and I'm being an old person right now. I am an old person, kind of, at least in theory, like been in the business a long time. I have this like internal struggle all the time with like, well, what are we doing? What are we trying to do? Are we actually trying to, you know, use some of those tools to give more time back to do this because this is important and this is getting us money? Or are we really, truly trying to just have these properties run themselves?
Right.
In the words of our analyst who just walked out, Addison, he's always like, Katrina, these properties can run themselves. And he's clearly being sarcastic because he sees what, you know, we do every day. I don't really know. I just love that you're just saying that in a perfect world, a beautiful thing would be, figuring out what can be done so this can happen, not trying to get rid of this,
right?
You know, not trying to get rid of this. Anything else you want to share with us?
I just want to share that I thank you so much for having me.
Bronti was so excited. She was so excited.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy that I've had some success with this and will continue to do so. And I'm just very excited to be on here today and to be talking about this very important topic.
Yeah, very, very important topic. And it's kind of like part 2 of the one that I did with Jay Beatty, you know, like obviously his version of, or that part of the conversation is very sort of like legal. But even he just said like, good for you that you're actually trying to do something. You're taking some steps. You're doing something different. Like we're not, you know, and it's not going to get better for marginalized, underserved communities. It's just not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And, you know, and just until some other things happen. So feel free to reach out if you're a listener and you have, you know, other questions, or even if you want to see some examples of like, if Bronti's okay with it, like even just the messaging that you just sent out yesterday. I've never seen anything like that. And just all of the different steps and the tone of it. I mean, you know, don't plagiarize her work, but understand like she would love it if other people would do this too. You would love it if other people would start to do these things too.
Absolutely. And I'm, you know, I think that one of the greatest things about our industry is sharing your skills and not keeping anything a secret. That's how people learn and grow. And, you know, I'm happy to help anybody who might be, you know, looking for some tips or advice or anything like that.
Yeah.
Here for it.
Reach out if you want to. Like and subscribe, I think is what I'm supposed to say.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you so much, Bronti.
Thank you.
Thank you.